Hey, Dr. Smith, here's my video journal for this week. It's 9:19 right now. I think one of the things that we talked about in particular, well, throughout the whole week, but in particular today, more with the sort of transaction and the economy of the jokes or humor, I think really stuck with me, especially after this day's class period, when we were talking about Flavor Flav and Cat Williams, that whole bit that we listened to in the Washington class. When I can't remember who made the point, might have been Wendy or might have been Ahmad. I can't remember who said that, like, well, we talked about. So let me back up here. We talked about the idea of Flavor Flav and Cat Williams sort of wearing that mask, and that's not their true identity when they're up on stage or when they're performing, and so sort of the idea of the economy and like whose expense all those jokes were about and that sort of thing. Like, who's that really hitting? Is it hitting them, their actual identity, or is it hitting Flavor Flav, or is it hitting Cat Williams? And I think that's an interesting point that I never really thought about before this class, and like sort of when they're wearing that mask and they're the butt end of the jokes, or they're the ones losing capital in that transaction, that they can just sort of take that mask off when they get back to their own personal lives and their private life. And I think that's also going back to that sort of duality between private and public humor that we talked about earlier in earlier weeks. So like sort of who's exactly taking the hits within that transaction. But I think it wasn't really. I got to thinking about it after class and sort of as I was processing that whole idea, the fact that like it may be that Flavor Flav or Cat Williams, like well, let's talk about Flavor Flav. During that roast, he's able to sort of take all those jokes in stride because he is getting paid for it. And he says, when we talked about how, like, let him make all the racist jokes and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, he's the one getting paid. And I think Ahmad said, like, he agreed with that, and I think Ash did too. Sort of that, like, they're gonna make those jokes anyway, so why not get paid for it? And I sort of maybe semi agree with that that thought line or that thought process, that like people are going to make those jokes anyway. But I think at the end of the day, it's sort of who's really losing in that transaction. Is it Flavor Flav, or is it Cat Williams, or on a larger scale, is it black people in general, or for different situations, whatever the identity that's being hit? Because we can joke about like Flavor Flav and stuff like that, or Cat Williams, but at the end of the day, I think when people of different cultures or different identities view that, they're sort of, whether it's right or not, which I don't think it is, but they're sort of representing a whole group of people on screen, especially people who aren't so in tune with the idea of them being the character as opposed to being an actual personality, actual identity up on stage or up on the screen. And so I think on a larger scale, it's more than just Cat Williams and more than just Flavor Flav that are losing in that transaction, or who are sort of being the butt of the joke. And I think it's an interesting point to think about, like who's exactly being affected. Is it just the individual, or is it an entire group of people? I think that sort of changes the whole conversation around that. Also, one of the things I thought about after class was, although we know now, although I know now, and a lot of people do know, that sort of like the characters that we see on screen or up on stage may not be the actual identities of the people portraying them. I think overall that line sort of gets blurred for the performers. We saw that with Dave Chappelle, as you mentioned in class, and I think also sort of that like repeated being being that sort of like on the butt end of all the jokes and stuff like that, or all the criticisms over and over again, sort of affects a person individually even after they take that mask off. And I think we see that with the high depression rates of comedic actors and performers, especially with the recent loss of Robin Williams and stuff like that. It's an interesting point to make, that like maybe they are wearing masks and maybe they are sort of not who they are in a private life, but the fact that they may also being affected in that private life as well. It's been an interesting point that I thought of, or sort of am processing as we move forward.